So in this part of our training, in the part 2, we're looking at how the different authorities, as well as definition and profiles in there. And why this section is quite important, it brings the first section together, is that it helps us to actually understand like how it fits into your chart as a holistic whole. I'm just going to share my screen. So firstly, I want to take you through almost like a building block of human design. And that building block is that, and I've written it out here, so you've got it in the slides as a kind of a permanent aspect, is that when you follow your strategy, so remembering that if you look at your chart, we each have our own strategy. Mine as a projector is to be invited. And when we follow that, that connects us to our authority. So that's what we're talking about today, is our authority. So if I look at my chart, I can see authority is splenic. So that means my place where I make my decisions is in my spleen. And yours will show your authority, or if you're looking at other people's charts, you'll see that it's different on each of them. So when we do that, what happens is that we operate from a mode where our open centers, they tell us what's going on and they're informing us correctly. And that then allows us to make decisions that are in line with what's good for us. And Ra would always talk about this being this geometry, this almost like that we move without knowing, in almost like a sacred geometry kind of formation, that we don't realize how our movements and our actions actually form a sacred geometry in our path that we're walking on. And so that is why we have this sort of pointer of like, okay, what is the strategy? Where's the authority? And what are my open centers telling me about this? Now, if you don't have any open centers, that's also you following, you've got to follow your authority. The open centers, remember, are the places where you're conditioned. Those are the places where you're holding stuff, where you have to ask yourself, like, oh my gosh, my head is open. I'm like, I can easily be influenced. Am I being influenced in the right way? Are these my thoughts? Is this something that I want? Versus that place where it's defined, where it's like, okay, I have my own thoughts. I'm not feeling like I'm influenced. And that doesn't mean that you're not sensitive or that you don't pick up stuff. Remember, we operate each differently. That's why human design says it's the science of differentiation. It's the science that each of us are so unique and so different that by understanding our charts and those around us, we realize that we're not the same, even though we might be the same in terms of our authority or our energy type. We are so different from each other. And, when we live by authority, we move away from making decisions that are based in the head and that we think about it. Is this the right thing? It's like, what is this telling us? Where is this coming from? The hierarchy of authority, as you can see, I've listed here, it brings up like, now this hierarchy is not that it's more important than the other. It's that the hierarchy of this is that the fact is, there are more people who have a solar plexus authority and emotional authority. And there is more people underneath that have sacral, which is, remember, the sacral, the emotional place, your emotional wave. So you're feeling it out. It's all about how you feel. Sacral, if you don't have an emotional wave, that's in your gut. So that doesn't mean that if you have an emotional wave, you won't feel it in your gut. Sacral's like, you've got to lean into how you feel in your gut. So if you have that as your authority, you've really got to push into it. Just like if your solar plexus is defined, you've got to push into your emotions. You've got to sit with it. You've got to really ask yourself. Spleen, that's splenic authority. I've got splenic authority. A heart, ego. So if we go back here, that would be here. That would be in the heart area, just to give you that reference. G center, remember, that's the direction, but an individual can have G authority. So they've got this G center authority. Environments, So we'll look at that, as well as moon, and that's a lunar authority. So as we go through this, we break it down, and then by looking at your charts and looking at charts of others, you'll be able to understand how they make decisions. That's why we can't always just say as a given to somebody, well, what does your gut say? Like lean into your gut. It's almost not fair to say that, because not everybody makes a decision from that place. And also it's not fair to say, like, how do you necessarily feel about it in terms of an absolute, because an individual that doesn't have an emotional wave is not going to tap into that kind of decision-making process. So those words and those energies are important when we work with that. It's also how I'd like you to view human design is view it as learning a software program. That's why I like it, because as an Adobe specialist and spent like my whole career specializing in software for Adobe, and literally having this photographic memory of how the whole application works back to front, teaching it, writing courses. When I started to learn human design, I started to see basically it's a software program, and this is how you plug into the software. And it's not like, oh, these are the things you like, and this is what makes your personality like this. It's like, this is the energy. And it's like the basic back end. It's the ones and the zeros of the software. And if you understand how that's coded, the rest of it will just fall into place for you. And I can say that you don't have to do anything, but just understanding it at a basic level is already what activates it for you. And it brings you back to you. Remember, that's the whole thing. It's not to bring that like decision-making process onto anyone else but you, for you to stand in your own strength, in your own self, in your own individuality. So if we start here with solar plexus, the emotional authority, that emotional wave provides that clarity for you. So it doesn't matter if you have one wave or two waves, it doesn't matter what that wave is per se in this example. It is just that, making emotionally charged decisions, saying things in the moment, responding because you're emotional about something. I'm just going to write this email. I'm just going to give this person a piece of my mind. I'm just going to say this because it's sitting on me and I need to just say it. That's not the place that you need to operate from. It's like that you've got to wait for the calm waters when you approach it. You've got to wait for those calm waters, because in those calm waters are where your truth and your clarity come. It's that waiting period for you to determine what's right for you. I always say for solar plexus authority, don't be spontaneous. And it's not that I say it, it's all the text in human design says, like, please don't be spontaneous, don't like just break up with somebody at the whim, or decide to be like, okay, great, I'm just going to do this spontaneously, and it's kind of like a big decision, and it leads you down a certain road, and you've committed to it now, and you start walking down that. So it's like, just wait, don't quit your job, don't leave your relationship, don't say let's move in together too soon, any of those things. Just, you've got to feel it out. And if you're feeling that it's not right, you've got to honor it. Where if everything in your head, if you look at this chart, everything in the head here and the ajna, it all makes sense. You're thinking about it, it's all logical, but it's not what you feel, right? What your feelings are saying and what your mind is saying are two different things. So who do you trust? You trust how you feel. Even if it's like you're thinking, oh my word, this doesn't make sense because I really like this person and I feel like there's something going on and I feel like this is a good opportunity, but everything inside of my feelings is telling me it's not. What do you trust? So it's about that. It's about getting that back into that trust. If you've got a child who has this authority, we always encourage the child to talk about how you feel. Tell me about it. Let's work on it. Let's, tap into that. So you can see the stats here, and these stats are obviously based at the time when I've pulled this off, which was yesterday. I just checked, and they're changing all the time in terms of percentages, but that solar plexus has the 46.82% of the population who need to actually make a decision from what feels right for them. If we move over to sacral is the gut. So it's a sacral response. And sacral speaks in words of It's like, it's a very like like it doesn't, but it's also a generator way of speaking. And so it's actually very good. But in that space where you ask the sacral, okay, so this is a generator who doesn't have an emotional wave. So let's only focus on this individual. When you ask this individual a question, asking them really good yes and no questions are very important, because they can ask their sacral and their sacral can respond. So if we feel that, sorry, I can just hear my one cat just crying loudly in the background, and it's Sunny. It sounds like she's in some sort of an agony, but I know she's just trying to get into her cupboard. So I apologize if you can hear any of that noise. So that sacral response that you're moving into, it's like, ask that sacral, like, is this good for me? Yes or no? And feel it. If someone asks you a question, is this good for me? Yes or no? Feel it. And then trust it, and then respond to it. So it's very much like, it's about boundaries as well. Do you have the energy to support this decision? And is this in line with what you really want? It functions in the moment for that individual. And it doesn't predict the future. It just tells you, this feels good for me. This doesn't feel good for me. And then you decide whether you have the energy, whether you have the energy available to undertake that task. And that's because when the sacral commits, and this is also a generator thing that I'm about to say, generators, when you commit because you're committing with your energy of your sacral, your life force energy. So it becomes really hard for you to then say, this isn't working for me. It's like, it's not the easiest thing to retract from that. So very important, sacral authority, find out, what is it saying to you? How does it feel? And if there's a maybe and there's not a proper response, you need a clear-cut response, a yes or a no. My sacral says yes, my sacral says no. If it doesn't say any of that, don't go through with it because it's not clear. Or ask yourself that question a little bit later on and see how it feels. Then splenic. I've got a splenic authority. So, splenic here, it's like, the spleen is all about survival. It's about like, knowing what's right in the moment, feeling it out, like, that environment, people, what's safe, what isn't safe. Spleen communicates. It's like it communicates in the moment with you. So I find like with splenic, it's one of those things where I'll get a flash of something just seconds before, and then that thing will either happen or my phone will ring, or I'll feel like, okay, no, I don't want to go down the street, and I turn around. It doesn't tell me in advance. It doesn't say, hey, this is what's going to happen. It's pretty much like quite instant, and it requires me to make that decision. Also, in the moment of engaging with someone or meeting someone or walking into a place, within seconds, it comes to me, that's my answer, and then it goes away. So it's quite a tricky one because I have to be, and for anyone who has this authority, you have to be really present in the moment to grab onto that. What is my spleen telling me about this person, this situation, this thing? Because it's gonna go, and because I've got a defined head and ajna, as you can see in my chart here, what's going to happen is I'm gonna think about it. I've got no other way of feeling it out, and then I can obviously talk myself in and out of something and be like, no, don't think that, Lauren. Like, it's fine. You just being judgmental, or you being too cautious. It's like. And that can be quite a tricky thing because it's very spontaneous. And again, it's not future predictive. It's just momentary predictive. It's like I walk into the house feels good. Okay, it's good. Or it's not good and I need to leave. So if I look at this combination, just to help you understand, because showing you my chart is, the most neutral way I can go about this without having another person's chart on you and asking permission. So if I look at this individual and I just separate myself here and I say, okay, well, what is your strategy? Your strategy is to be invited. And what's your authority? Splenic. So what does that mean, right? So if I put that into a sentence, that means that when I'm invited, I then access my authority. My authority tells me how that feels for me. And I use the word feel in brackets, but it gives me that information as saying, like, Lauren, this is good or this isn't good. And in that moment, I need to make that decision and say, yes, I feel activated. This is something I want to go through with. Hey, Lauren, would you like to come and teach for us? Would you like to come to this party? Would you like to, it's that being invited. Would you like to speak on behalf of, I'm activated, I feel it, or I immediately don't feel, and I'm like, that doesn't feel right. So that would be sort of the communication that then I would have within my system. And so because I'm so open emotionally, you can see also when you look at these charts, you've got to look at the open centers and you see, okay, open emotional space, open G centers. So really have to trust in that momentary flash, knowing if it's good or if it isn't good. Now, ego manifested authority. I didn't have a chart because it's so rare, you can see in terms of the stats, it's 0.79%. So it would be almost very rare that I would actually have a chart of someone who had this, just in terms of stats. So I created a little channel there just to show you, and that goes from the throat to the heart. And this is a manifested projector. So, we kind of we leave the generator energy behind here, because generator energy, you can only have sacral and you can only have solar plexus. Like, those are the only two that generators operate on. And then you're left with manifestor and projector, because reflect is also by itself. So, that's just how the authorities kind of tier. And when you see an individual who has this authority, it's very much about articulation. It's about verbal expression. It's about trusting what they say, listening to what they say. So, someone who would need to talk about something. There is a very similar one, which I'll go into, which is in the next one that we'll look down. But a client of mine has it's also got to do with articulation and expression from the G center. And she uses a tape recorder and she talks to herself and she records how she feels about things. And then she listens back to it to find her truth. I thought that was a very interesting way of how she manages it, because when she talks to other people, what happens whenever we talk to someone, they always want to give us advice. And so it's like, am I listening to the person, or are they asking me for advice, or am I just listening? So for an individual here, they need to talk. They need to listen to what they say. They need to trust what they say, because when they blurt out things and they just speak, right? They're speaking the truth and they're designed to have an impact. And so when we see a chart like this, we need this individual to speak. Be quite interesting to see, because I notice that often when we have aspects in our chart where we're asked to speak, for some reason, we've been silenced. We've been silenced by those around us who've told us that what we say don't matter, and that our voice doesn't have a voice. And we have gates that need to be heard. So, when we see that, it would be interesting to see how free is this individual to speak, or how suppressed have they been in speaking. Going to the next one is very much, it's only a projector. And this is a G center heart. It's an ego projected. Not egos in, like, when your heart is defined and your G center is defined, I find it quite interesting, because people will experience that individual as being big, like they take up a lot of space in the room. And they only take up a lot of space because those around them are either open in those spaces. And so they will feel it. So they'll be like, oh, that person's like quite egotistical. They're quite like, they've got a very strong personality. And so those individuals who may have experienced that, again, it's like, have you been silenced in your strength? And are you like pulling back because you don't want to come across as being egotistical, and you've been kind of pointed out that you're full of yourself, or that and so you retract and you push yourself further back? Where it's not, is that like you have a strong willpower, you have a strong direction, and you need to stand in that whenever we see those spaces defined. And that's just general. Now I'm going to talk into ego projected. Ego projected, this is an example. This chart you're seeing is what it looks like to have this. And this is someone I know, and I know this individual really well. And as a projector, this individual says, like, what do I do? Just sit around and wait for people to invite me, because that's my strategy. So, if I come across and I walk into a space, people think this person is a lot. And they're like, yo, that person's a lot. But when you look at their chart, you're like, actually, they're not. They're so open. What you're experiencing is their G center and their heart. And it's quite a thing. And, I can't say it enough, because I also know this individual, and they do come across as a lot, but they're actually not. It's just the centers. So, they come across as a lot because their projector energy is a very, it's the way that it works, is that penetrating energy. And when it's not invited, and then it has these spaces defined, and they give an opinion, it's like, whoa, the other energies and the other people are like, wow, like that was a lot. That's why it's important that they prepare themselves, they learn about things, they're here to guide. This individual's in a great position because they are in a guiding therapeutic environment where people come to them and they can give advice. But, it is quite a tricky profile to have, because they're so open as well. So going over to self-projected, again, another projector profile where you have a G center to the throat. And it's like, whatever you need to know is in what you say. So this is the individual who I spoke about, who records themselves and has a recorder on their phone, and just walks around with one and just talks into a recorder and then listens to it. Because it's really hard for them, because when they discuss their opinions and their decisions with other people give them their input, and then it's like, but I was just kind of, it's a sounding board. And, it's like, how do you work with this? You don't want to ignore your voice. Anything that's connected to the throat, you can see it's quite important that the individual speaks, and it's like, it can be heard, and they can make that decision for themselves, and they need to make that decision for themselves. And then another one as well, which is again, the environmental projector. So that's your ajna to throat, ajna to head, or all three that get connected and worked out. And then everything below is completely open in that chart. So another individual who also needs to listen to what they say, needs to feel out if something is right for them. They need to be able to recognize how it feels in their body, the rest of their body, everything down, because they're so open. And there wasn't actually any data on this, because these individuals, again, are super rare to come across. They don't have any other guidance system, so they can get very lost in their head in terms of what to do. They can also, this is a chart of someone I actually have done a reading for, and the individual was young, super stressed, and had cancer. And it's quite a trick. It's very tricky. It's very tricky because, these open charts like this, you can, just as it is to be so defined, you can be so open and so influenced, and feeling like you don't have a voice and you don't stand in yourself, and you actually end up getting quite sick in that process too. So lunar authority and reflectors, we only see this in a reflector chart. They're the only ones who have a lunar authority. And that's designed to basically connect them to a lunar cycle. Because as the moon moves through its transits, each of these gates move and are activated in the reflector. And then the reflector gets to feel how they feel. And I say feel, but they get to experience it through their whole beingness over that month. So it's like having a long emotional wave, and they get to like work it out in themselves and kind of see, am I surprised and delighted by this? Am I disappointed? Is there any physical suffering? Is there discomfort? You know, they mirror their environment. And they're like, okay, this is what I need to do. And for them to have advisors and confidence, which, you know, they can talk to and they can consult. And it's not even that it's a sounding board or they need to record themselves. It's just they need time. They need time to make those decisions. They need time to decide. Also very rare. I mean, the only, I did post it actually on Instagram, but the only reflector that's known in terms of being famous is Sandra Bullock, and she's a reflector, so she's quite interesting to observe. If you want to take the time to watch one of her movies or read a little bit about her, is very curious. And remembering that reflectors reflect their environment, they also, what you see in them are reflections of yourself. They're a very curious and separate entity unto themselves. If you come across a reflector, if you have a reflector in your family, if you have a reflector as a client that you're working with, learn more about reflectors, encourage them to look into human design and actually understand themselves, because the more that they understand how they work, because they are so different to everybody else, it's so important for them to trust basically that they are different, completely different, and they need to work on their own cycle and movement. So just to go to a quote from Ra saying, you know, that when we are transforming our consciousness, what happens is, and what we're doing here is we're looking at our software and we're saying like, hey, this is how software works. And this is how this program is going to structure. And then what happens is that the mind comes and it tries to reason it and it tries to make it confusing. And then it's like, no, but wait, I'm supposed to be in charge. I'm making all these decisions. And then that becomes the challenge. It becomes a challenge where you start to think about your authority and you think like, wow, like I'm going to actually start working with that. Because if it's the only thing that you leave with is just working with that guidance system, then the rest of your design kind of falls into place. That's the amazing part about human design. You don't have to do anything more than that. So this next part we're going to look at is about definitions. And definitions are quite important because they also involve how we are conditioned. They also involve how we learn, how we partner, how we feel about things. And so you can see that reflectors, again, they don't have a definition. So, you know, how they absorb information and take stuff into themselves is different, right? And a single definition. So when you're looking at your chart, your definition is going to be over here. It will always be listed. It'll tell you whether it's split, single, quad, triple. You can see here the percentages that I've given. So when you've got a split definition, the correct terminology for that is that you would either be simple or wide split. I don't usually go into that much detail in the reading, because when I look at readings with clients, because already just trying to understand whether you are single, split, or triple is enough to take in. But I'll explain it in the training, and that's why you guys are here. And then we have triple and quadruple. So these are the ways you're defined. And now you're thinking, okay, what does definition mean exactly? So definition means that if you look at your channels in your chart, right? And I'll use my chart here as an example for you. So when I say channel, the channel is that when two gates see each other, they form a line of energy. I always call it a cocktail because on the one side you have the vodka and the other side you have the orange juice, and then they mix and they form a cocktail of energy. And that cocktail has its own flavor, it has its own beingness, and it's different from just the gate in isolation where it's sort of just hanging and holding there. So this channel here, when a channel, if I were to go, okay, well, can I link, how do my channels flow? So if I go, okay, this goes 61 to 24, okay, there's 11 to 56, and then I look here and I go, does there anything in the throat here? Are there any channels that are connecting further? No, so it stops there, right? So that's one section. So I go, okay, there's that. Then I look around. Oh, okay, there's my root, 54 to 32. Okay, let's follow that. Ooh, that connects 44 to 26. Okay, great. So I've got nothing to bridge. If I had another gate that was linking to the throat, then I would be able to track this whole flow of energy. And I would call that flow, not I, human design would call that flow single. It's a single flow. It flows. When I have a division like this, because there's nothing to link it, right? We call that a split. The only thing that would bridge that for me is an individual who comes into my auric space, my energy space, who has the 16 in the throat. And the 16 in the throat, they would then go, oh, okay, well, here's 16, and 16 connects to 48. So when we're together, we're a connected unit. And so that being split makes that suddenly that energetic configuration, that coming together, makes that energy together as a single definition. So what happens when I am split? I feel half. I feel more half than someone who is a single definition, someone who has a continual flow. Now, it doesn't matter if the single definition only has two centers defined, and those two centers have one channel. They're still a single, there's one continuous flow. How does a single definition individual feel? They feel more of an individual. They don't feel that halfness as much. It's very seldom in conversation when you start looking at charts, do you hear single individuals say, oh, I just really want a relationship, or, they're always the ones who say, travel on your own. You don't need a relationship. It's, just do your thing. Stop fussing. They're always, that's the kind of feeling. Because why? Because they've got a single flow of energy. They're also taking in information straight away. So I always use an example and say, here we have a classroom of kids, right? And teachers can always relate to this. And it's just so spot on, because you got this classroom of kids and we're all standing on the side and we're looking on, and I say to you, watch this. And the teacher says something, she presents a topic and she says, what's the answer? And you have a few kids put up their hands and they answer. Single definition. They're there. They're in the moment. It's flowing. They got it. They're answering the question. And it doesn't mean they're going to retain the information. And, it's just they're in the moment. They know how they feel. An argument with a single definition. The single definition is telling you how they feel. They're expressing themselves. They're there. The split definition's like, whoa, I'm still catching up. I need time to process. I've got things are happening in my energy space. I'm taking in this information in two different places. So the rest of us, because statistic wise, largely split, hence the reason why we have lots of love movies and finding the person you're meant to be with and Hollywood, split definition. Codependency is a shadow of that. So the split definition kids, some of them will look and ask and say, can you just show me that again? and they make a little note and stuff. And then teacher said, oh, okay, they got it, right? They got it. Perfect. And then you get the others. You get those who we showed here, the triple and the quad. And the triple sitting there and they're going like, I still don't get it. And then a single or a split definition is trying to help them and explain to them. And they're just like, I can't even read this word. I don't even know how to spell triple. You know, you're putting me under unnecessary pressure. Now I've got to stand up and I've got to like read in front of the class, and I'm triple and I can't, and I'm struggling, and I have a bit of dyslexia, and nobody's spending time with me. No one's explaining things, and I feel stupid. And how am I going to cope? Right. And that's the experience, because education, everything is set up. Look at your percentages. Education is set up for split and single. Mostly split, but you know, if you're in a class with a lot of single definitions, you're in a lot of trouble, even if you're split, because those guys are going to be processing and you're going to be taking time. So how do we compare ourselves? We say like, oh, I'm stupid, or I'm not as bright. It's not true. Can you consider the fact that you need to take in information in different parts of your software? It's not just, I can't just read the information. I also need to experience it, right? Here, look at the chart. There's the root. It's going to the spleen. So, you know, there's this flow of energy. There's these are tribal. These are tribal circuitries. So I need to be with the collective. It's experiential. Like, let's talk about it. Like, you know, here's my throat. I'm going to read about them, take it in. I'm learning with the tribe. When I'm not in that environment, it's hard to learn because I'm not with the tribe. So we often beat ourselves up about stuff. When we understand this, it makes so much sense. If you are a triple, if you have a kid that's a triple, those kids you spend time with, they are smart. You are smart. It's just the information takes longer to absorb. Imagine the experience of the quadruple, right? That experience of that for that individual. Here you have someone who's kind of just like, you know what, I can't read, I can't add, but I'm really good with my hands and I can make stuff. And that's what I do. But don't ask me to do anything. Don't ask me to read this piece of paper. Don't ask me to sign. I just don't want to do it. So it's so important to see this, especially for kids and for ourselves, to understand like how we need to give ourselves time to learn, how we take in. Now, just going back to split, because here I've got simple and wide. In my chart, I'm a smaller, so they say it's a simple, because I only need like very, very few gates that need to be activated, like in order for me with another to form a whole, right? In that channel, where it's like so separate that it would take a wider kind of pathway that you would have to find, okay, where's a gate active? Okay, how could that, okay, then that person would need to have a 3, and their sacral would have to, and then that person need to have a 2, and then, you know, you can see, and then that would be a wider split for that. So again, now here, if you've got a wider split, you are going to take a bit longer. If you've got a more simple, smaller, there's that little bit closer, I would say, to single definition, but not quite, because it's different. Your energy is still split. So those are quite important points to consider. So if we just look back here, now these charts will look more sense. You can see single, one continuous flow. And then here we have simple, with that example I've just showed you, a wider split. So you can see the head and the ajna, and then all this happening on the other side of the chart, the solar plexus, the heart, the root. There's like such a separation there. It's really got to go through, it's got to jump quite far to get back to connect with that flow. Triple. And then I didn't have a quadruple client, so I had to pull the data from Jovian just to show you what that would look like. And one can spend time kind of looking at the slides, by yourself and going through it and contemplating it. But especially for learning, it's quite a thing. Now, from the data that's been gathered and the experiences of individuals who've spoken about being triple split, a lot of them feel that because it's harder to bridge a triple, you could say. It's like the triple split, it's like you have to find someone who has all those gates in order to bridge so that you feel then complete in the relationship. They would often feel more complete in situations where there is more than one person in the household. So they enjoy share communal spaces, having mom, dad, and a kid and animals around, make the triple feel more complete. Otherwise, a triple will very much operate in terms of how it feels, very single definition. They also like to be activated. So they like to go out where there's like a coffee shop, a bit of a buzz, go walking through the mall, because what happens is all the energy types around them activate them, especially with the open head, because the open head wants to be inspired. So it's like, I can't just sit here and be stuck in my house the whole time. I want to go out. I need to see, that's that experience that you're having. So I hope that makes sense, and that's made definitions easier to understand. It's never an absolute. So I know loads of single definition individuals who are married and have kids. It doesn't mean that they don't marry or have kids. But remember, energy and how you're taking energy in and how you're absorbing experience is really what this is about, especially when it comes to learning. This is a big one for learning. And I even forget it myself, when I'm learning and when I'm dealing with myself. So coming back to this with me, it helps me to kind of go back and say, this morning I was thinking, can I carry on with these English studies that I'm wanting to do for this English degree? And I'm saying to myself, you know what, I actually, if I'm truthful and I listen to what my spleen says, I don't think I can. Why? Because I'm split. I need the classroom experience. I'm not getting the classroom experience. So I'm struggling. I'm only getting the head in the ajna. It's not even going to the throat. I've got no one to talk to it about. And roots, that's in my tribal wave. Where's my community? I don't have it. So it's harder. So when you look at your chart, you can understand okay, why do some individuals work better in isolation by themselves? They don't need that. Learning is set up to talk to different energy configurations. And it's about finding your energy configuration, what works, and knowing that, because that's when your genius will come out. Not genius is in wow, I've got the best marks, I'm this super clever person. Genius is in genius in terms of the word of how they use it in the gene keys and human design. It's that your full creative potential, regardless of if you can count from 100 backwards and divide it by 6. So what I think we should do before we move into the profiles is we're going to take a comfort break, and then we'll come back and you can make some tea. If you have any questions, you can pop them into the chat, or you can ask me when we come back. And let's just take 10 minutes and then we'll reset. Okay. So let's continue. Do my share screen. Perfect. Okay. So the 12 profiles. You'll notice that in your overview of your chart, you will have a reference to a profile. And here, my profile being a 4-6, and you, as illustrated here, you get 12 different profiles. And these profiles, and why I've chosen this picture, is the only image I've used really in human design, is that I really want to get through to you that it is a costume. It's an outfit that you wear. So it's that overlay of the dress energetically. speaking. Now, the profile structure is basically has 6 points, and each of those have a different energy vibration to them. And you're made up of 2 of those. So now, keeping in mind, as my example, I was that 4-6. So with a 1, the 1 is very much the investigator, teacher aspect. A 2 in your profile is a hermit, withdrawal aspect. The 3 is a martyr. A 4 is the opportunist in terms of community, people, tribe. 5, heretic. 6, role model. Now, if we consider what the learning journey is, or how would things work in terms of you learn something, right? So it's about investigation. And when you're learning something, you're taking it in. And then there's a part of that taking in, that process, that 2, where one withdraws and reflects on what you've learned. And then the 3 comes out, right? And I'm going to change the slide here. The 3 comes out, and the 3 is like, okay, well, like, I feel like I want to experiment with this. I want to bring it out. I want to talk about it. I want to try. I want to see, like, how does it work? And then the 4 is like, okay, now I've seen how it works. Let me reflect on that. Let me see, let me share this with others. Let me bring the community in. And then the 5 is like, this is how, this is this sort of, I want to save the day energy, but also it's about this, like, coming forward, standing up. And that grows into the role model. So in this hexagram that we call it in human design, we have the lower trigram and the upper trigram. Everything in the lower trigram is really about working it out. And in the upper trigram is about sharing it, putting it out there, being out there. So that doesn't mean that because you might have numbers in the lower trigram, that it's not that you're going to go, you're not going to be out there and share or anything. It's not like that. It's just that process, that experimental, that reflection, that aspect is all about foundation. And the upper is all about, like, being out, right? Out there. So we see a profile being a combination of our personality and our design. Now, without making it too complicated, if you look at your chart, you can see your design column and your personality. Remember last week we discussed that design is about everything that is needing to be lit up, everything that is unconscious made conscious. The design of you, who you're coming into, that full embodying, where the personality is, those are the aspects you are aware of. You work with it. So that's why when you have a reading and you're looking at human design, you're understanding your chart, there'll be aspects where you're like, is that me? Versus, okay, I know that's me. And then the experience will be like, well, I guess like some of the reading was right. But if we look at what parts of the reading that you were struggling to resonate with, or the information you were resonating with that was a struggle, what we would see is it probably sits on the design side, the side that's still waiting to be made conscious, waiting to be lit up. So the profile it comes off the position of the sun. So the personality at the time you were born, design 3 months before, the point of that degree, a 4, 6. So I, as that 6, wouldn't be aware of and fully conscious of that role model that I take to grow into, to become. until later in my life where I fully embody that. Where the 4, I know community is important to me. I know that friends and that having a tribe and sharing and all of that is all part of who I am. I know that. I'm very, very much aware of that 4, but less aware of the 6. Now, remembering here what the quote was, that the basis of profile is that recognition of the duality that exists within each of us. So when we're looking at human design 2, we're looking at duality. We're looking at those 2 aspects. So if I just move over to the next slide, here is the 6 primary roles that we have. And we discussed that briefly, but, the lower trigram is absorbed in personal process. And then the upper aspect of it is transpersonal. It's also an outwardly directed process. They want to share with others. So it's quite interesting how the upper trigram takes the lower trigram and goes, hey, come, like, look at what you're doing. You're doing like all these great things. Like, we got to show people, we have to get you out there, right? So the upper trigram lifts up the lower trigram and says, let's do this. Let's kind of like, let's show it, let's share, and the lower trigram is like, okay, it's this like introspection. There's this trial and error process. If you have a 3 in your profile, and this is quite a big one, because if you have a 3 in your profile, taking advice from other people dictating to you how things should be done, your process is very trial and error. You can listen, you can hear, you can, take advice, but for you've got to go out there. It's got to get a little bit messy. You've got to like dig in the ground. You've got to like, oh, the plate's hot. How hot? Put my hand on the plate. Okay, very, very hot. That plate's hot, right? So that's a 3. The 3 is about that. It's about getting out there. So a 3, when you have a 3, it's like, what happens when in trial and error, right? Trial and error is you go out, you do that stuff, the plate is hot. And then what happens is that 4 goes, oh, the plate is hot. And don't touch the plate's hot. So as the 4, I observe the 3, right? And I'm like, oh, yeah, you really shouldn't do that. So the 4 is also learning, because they see what happens with the 3. A 4 can't go out there and get messy and just be like, oh, I'm just going to try all the stuff and how hot is the plate, and act like a 3, because it's not going to really work so well for the 4, because the 4 is supposed to sit and observe and be like, that is good behavior, that's bad behavior. Okay, let me reflect on that. This is how, so there's also that, like, while it's a costume that we wear and people experience, and there's this energy, there's also great learning in the profiles that, if one goes into a real depth look at it, there's so much you can learn about the profiles and learn about yourself in that process. So moving to actually looking at like and we're going to look at these 12 profiles. What are the 12 profiles? Now you'll notice on the left hand side, the top left, I have the trigram, and on the right hand side I have the hexagram. And why I've highlighted it, I want to show you how these numbers kind of work in terms of that you can see their relationship and also where they sit. Are they in the lower or are they in the upper? And it kind of gives you an idea of also how you operate, so you might have a lower trigram number like a 2, and then you might have an upper trigram, which is a 5 or a 6. And that might be, so there's this portion of you that goes, it's about that integration, working, understanding, and then bringing it out or sharing it, or there's that aspect to it. So the 1-3 is about being that investigator. It's that martyr, but it's more that, like, with the 3, there's this experimental aspect. 1 is all about investigation, this questioning, this trial and error, the spiritual curiosity, the self-discovery, looking, trying to understand, having a solid foundation of the subject, practicing, working it out, like sitting, reflecting. And then what happens? The one, although yes, it's in the lower trigram, the one is very much a teacher, because the one goes back and they're like, look, right? Look at the hexagram here. Do you see how the one reflects next to the 6, right? So it's like the one can flip, and what's the 6? The role model. So without realizing it, the one like starts to perfect what they do. They start to understand. And what's the 6? The one that comes out, that shares. So it's like that gravity to want to like, hey, like I've worked out this thing, and this makes so much sense. And I actually want to share it. And I'm showing people, and there's a learning that takes place. But the important thing for the 1-3 to hold inside of themselves is that there is no such thing as failure, because in this profile line, there can be a sense of failure, where it needs to be looked at from a trial and error process. How's this working? Let me play around with it. Let me, get into it. So that's the energy of the 1-3. The energy of the 1-4 is, again, the 1, the investigator, and the 4, the one who, it's about opportunity, it's about community, it's about that, I would say to a number 4, and it applies to myself too, but it very much in human design is like, don't burn bridges. The 4 can't afford to burn a bridge because it won't be able to cross. There's no option. It's just don't burn a bridge. That's a good lesson for everyone, but especially for the 4. Don't do that, And so what is a 1-4? Here is a 1-4 is they're looking, they're investigating, but then because it's not like this 3 energy where it's like, haha, is a plate hot, so I'm going to burn my hand. The 4 goes, that's interesting. Investigating, looking at it, reflecting on it. Don't get too messy, find out where things, how they work, and then go through it, reflect on it, look for opportunities. The 4 is very good at seeing opportunities. Always if you want a referral for something and you're like, I need to find a good doctor, or I need if a person has a 4 in their profile, ask them. That person is always connected, whether it's in the front, in the conscious aspect or the unconscious. A 4 in a profile knows people, and they know they can refer. So, and a 4 will always ask you, do you know such and such, or do you know where? So, that's how they connect, because it's part of that community. Now, the other thing too is that the quality of this 1-4's life is very much determined on the relationships that they have. So it's just like investigating, being curious, having these relationships and sort of sharing. And that's very important for this energy, but not getting too messy. Finding also authorities and aspects of their life that they can learn from. So 1-4 needs mentors, and especially for this individual, I'd say, whenever I say it's human design. Okay, if I'm making it a personal thing, I'll mention it. But is to actually find authorities within different lines of development. So a spiritual teacher, but don't look at that spiritual teacher for being your therapist or to help you solve other problems that are out of your spiritual growth that's relevant in that line. Then you want a business mentor. Your spiritual teacher can't be your business mentor as well. Find a business mentor, and so forth. And so for that 1-4, it's very important, having those examples to work with. And then the 2-4 is like the hermit opportunist. So again, those around them, not burning bridges, but the 2 is the hermit that retracts. Interestingly, though, a lot of 2-4s that I know are not actually introverted, reclusive people. If I pointed out some 2-4s, you'd be like, oh, those people they're quite outgoing. I would have imagined they had the 2. What does that 2 mean, though? That 2 means that here is an individual who needs time by themselves. We all need time by themselves, but here we're talking about energy, working with their energy. They need time by themselves. They need left alone. They're kind of working out things. They need their own time, but they can't hermit completely. They still have to be connected with their tribe, with their community. A 4 meets people through people they know. A 4 gets jobs through people they know. A 4 has great experiences when they connect through people they know. So with a 2 here, you still have to be connected. You can't disconnect yourself completely. You can't retreat from the tribe. You're meant to be sharing and engaging. The 2, though, here, this combination of energy struggles to see themselves clearly. They struggle to see their gifts and their talents, and they almost don't see it as the other sees it. So it's like they really need to get that feedback, and they also need to understand that if you are a 2-4, when people give you feedback, it's very important, because that feedback is reflecting on aspects that you're good at, where your skills lie. So just stop for a moment and listen to what that feedback is, because if it's continuous, there's a hint for you in terms of where your actual genius, your ultimate path is leading you in. And it can be the fact that you're just an amazing baker, or that you are brilliant athlete and that you should actually be mentoring younger kids. It can be a variety of things. But again, you've got the 4, you're looking for work, you got to get out there. You got to get out there on the ground. You've got to go to the coffee shops. You've got to hand out your stuff. You've got to chat to people. It's a tough one, because if you've got a 4 in your profile, you don't work well with just applying randomly online. You've got to be out there on the ground. But here's this 2 who goes oh no, I just want to hermit. I just want to close off. I don't want to talk. I don't want to. And then you disconnect yourself. 2-5. So here we have that hermit aspect, but this heretic, that one that it's you want to be left alone to do your thing, but the 5 wants you to go and make it happen. It wants you to lead. The 5 is a leader. The 5 stands up, it's it stands there and it's yes, I've got this, I can make it right, I don't want to, I'm a good, and it's not it's not like I just want to lead and, just step aside. It's that here is an individual who is a good leader, who can take on responsibility, who is able to bring about change. But then you have an individual that gets projected on. The 5 is an individual who often gets a lot of projections that, oh, you can do this. It's you can, you can fix that or help with that. And then they're but I don't really want to, especially with the generator energy. And then they're oh, this doesn't really feel right. And it's not right. And then it's oh, well, that went wrong. And then it's your fault. And then the 5's that didn't feel very good. And then the 2 goes, let's just shut down. So it's about here that knowing when to step into the leadership role and when to retreat back. Because, that if that respect is not given, there's going to be pushback. There's going to be this uncomfortable energy play that takes place. 3-5. So a 3-5, remember 3s, how hot is the plate, right? And then this leader, this individual who's able to stand, they're diplomatic, they're coming forward. And so this is a very they always say it's a very save the day energy, because you talk to any 3-5s and the 3-5, and that's why the examples here of there's a fire in the movie house, and where's the fire engines, where the people, where the exits, and the 3-5 is like, I'm here, don't worry, I will sort it out. And they don't even, it's not that they are intentionally like it, it's just that, it's like they're on their phone, they're calling the fire brigade, they're making it happen, they're helping the people to the exit, they're like, don't worry, it's all good. Does everybody have what they need? That's very 3-5. So very resilient, very adaptable, mutative. It's like, I love the 3-5 energy, because the 3-5, and I have 3-5, I have 3-5 in my life. And it's like, it's okay. Just like, we just put it out there, just get messy, do it. Like, I'm not afraid to fail. And the 4-6 is going like, whew, this is not going to end well. Like, for me, you might get away with this, but I'm not going to get away with it. So it's that understanding each other's profiles and then working with it. But 3-5s are very magnetic, and the way that they deal with stuff, it's like the other energies forgive them, because they're vibrating at that energy. It's like, it's okay, it's fine, it's 3-5, it's so and so. They're just fighting for what they believe in. They're changing things. They're here to bring about a message, about staying true to yourself. They're discerning what's right for them. They're out there. They're changing the world. It's that kind of a feel. And you see them, you're like, oh, 3-5. So if you're 3-5, just keep doing what you're doing and don't overthink it, as well. Don't get stuck in that. You'll be forgiven. You've got the grace. Your energy activation has it. And then the 3-6. So this role model aspect, and then this martyr. How does that look? So, here is this playground of trial and error. And then there's this like learning, immersing, and then finding out, coming out of like into this role model. Like the 6 in the profile, the 6 is, it's like a very good bottle of wine left at the right temperature for 25 to 40 years, and then you drink it at the end. And so that's the 6. The 6 is like, it takes the whole life of the 6. And it sounds so terrible because life is so short, but a 6 is never in their full power until later in their 40s, early 50s. It's their maturation. It takes them a long time. And that doesn't mean that they're not wise, they're not capable. It's just that their life is divided up into segments, and who they are in their 20s and their 30s is different to who they then become in their 40s, and then who they mature out to be. And so for the 3-6, like remembering the 3 again, that trial and error. So you have an individual who's like, I've tried so many different things, and I've been through all these things, and I've questioned everything about my life, my sexuality, my education, my everything. And it's like, and now, like, I've been searching for who I am, like so many different relationships, so many different experiences. And here I'm talking for the 3-6, I've gone into all different places. I've lived, I've traveled, I've adventured, and they're like, and I don't feel like other people because, that's my journey is a different journey. And then as they get older, they become this role model, and others look up to them and be like, wow, like, your life has been amazing. Like, that it's like, that's the thing with the role model, because if the 6 is on the design side, the 6, anything that's after that number. So 3, conscious, 6, unconscious. So that role model will still be in that state of like being, like they don't realize their role model. That's the whole thing. And they're not, I think, ever meant to really. They're aware of it, but they're never meant to be aware of it. Ra once said, that what is that role model? He says the person standing in front of you in the queue, a few people ahead, and you look at that person and they're in their 60s and they're like, they're young, they're vibrant, and you look at them and you're like, wow. But you don't go up to them and say, oh, hey, you're a role model. And I really admire the fact that, you're this very dynamic older person and I look up to you. So we think about those people in our life, like who we know, who are those people who are older in their 60s, who look fantastic, right? And have lots of energy and like just have this like vivacity about them and have lived this very dynamic life. Definitely got a 6. And wouldn't be surprised if there's a 3 in there too. They say with the 3 6s, just do your own thing. But they are always seeking out a partner in crime, especially if they are split. But they do like to have a partner in crime to undertake their different adventures and the exploration. So the 4 6, the opportunities come through those you know, your network. You have different stages of development. It's trial and error. You're working out things. Does this work for me? Doesn't it work for me? There's like, and then at that point, as you become older, you grow into you and you become your true self and you're comfortable to stand in that. And it's like everything you've learned, everything you've been through, it comes in. The 4, the 4 can often like feel like, oh my gosh, this is like all too much. And then there's this like 2 suddenly, it reflects into the 2 and it's like, oh, I'm going to hide away. And we say 4 6, like don't do that. Always don't isolate yourself. You're not a hermit. You've got to get out there. You've got to connect with the community. You've got to connect with people in order to succeed. Also, you can see at the bottom there's listed famous, the famous numbers, which you can link to individuals that you could look at and be like, oh, that's interesting that Brad Pitt is a 4 6. Like, or it's interesting that Ra was, I think he was, I think we might have gone past his, I can't remember offhand now, all the information in my head. I think he's still to come actually. So the 4-1 opportunity, but investigation, there's like this looking, it's a rare profile, they're very much like here to be who they are. They're still part of that community. They are curious investigators. Funny enough, like whenever I come across a 4-1, they're always involved with education on some level. Like my one primary school teacher from like back in the day, I did her charts and she's retired now and she was a 4-1 and it just made so much sense because everybody just loved her. She's just like that, like, and she was so part of the school and she was so caring and she always took time with all the kids. And, it's like she was so curious and you always felt like she was learning with you and she was always sharing with you. And so that's like, it's such a teacher profile. It's such a tangible teacher profile. And they just are so who they are. And it's about, that journey and they want to share and they don't hold judgments and they're very easygoing. And the thing is that you don't want that number again to be burning bridges and kind of storming around. It's not a good number with the 4 in the front in order to achieve and move forward. And then the 5-1. So here we have that 5. What is that 5 doing? The 5 is saying like, here I am. I'm the heretic. I'm diplomatic. I'm standing forward. Like I am a leader. And it's not, again, there's no egotistical. It's just this energy of that. And then the investigation. So, this person can do it. This person can save it and make it good. And then others project onto that person. Oh, you can do this. You can fix it. And that person's like, whoa, maybe I can't. And they're like, I'm still trying to work things out. And there's this like responsibility. 5, when you got a 5 in the front, you almost get like pushed into responsibility. It's strange. Like you can't, doesn't matter how introverted or quiet you are. If you got that 5, it's like people just see it and they're like, oh, this unconsciously, like that person can do it. And it's like, yeah, can you do it? You seem really good at this in your job. And, would you be able to do X, Y, Z? And so it's just this projections from other people. And here is also an energy of karmic relationships. And that The 5-1 energy carries encounters that are often past life related. There's a lot of that energy of like working through karmic interactions, meeting people, having certain experiences that lead and change the course. It's like they will often come into contact with others who will change their direction. And they thought they're going this way and they'll end up going that way. Not in a bad way at all. But 4 or 5-1 is like, just say, don't take on too much responsibility. Don't feel that you have to because others believe you can. Find your boundaries. Don't compromise. Do what you feel that you're comfortable with doing. So here was where Ra, the founder of Human Design, was a 5-1. It's interesting also to hear him talk about this profile on YouTube. There's videos on each of these profiles. If you Google them, you just type in and you can find him actually talking about the profiles and the energy of those profiles too. And then the 5-2. So 5 and 2, we're now getting more familiar with these numbers as we're working through them. So what happens here with the 5-2? It's like, hey, you can do this, you can solve it, and then the 2 goes like, I just want a hermit. Like, I just don't, this is like a bit too much. Like I'm withdrawing. I need to process, like, so it's like that flipping between being out there and in, I don't want the spotlights. I'm feeling a little bit shy. I find 5-2s are more introverted than the 2-5s, weirdly enough. Just in terms of people I've come across with that profile, it's just that they are. And again, it's that 2, that aspect of the 2 that wants to unconsciously, consciously withdraw when it has too much to deal with, versus the 2-5 where it knows it needs to withdraw. And then the 5 is sort of being like, it's like getting comfortable with accepting that it actually needs to step up a little bit. And then the 6-2, that role model hermit. So a 6 being in the frontier. So they still have their journey, their life, their segments, but knowing that there is this conscious aspect of being a role model. And they're not seeking it out, but they are consciously aware that people are looking at them and they are having an impact. And then the 2 going like, whoa, this is uncomfortable. I want to retreat. I want to go into my shell because, I'm not so sure if I'm ready to engage with life and become this objective, wise role model that everybody is putting me in this place for. And these individuals, they're so gifted and they're so wise. And one of the lessons that they need to learn is that they're not here to try and change the truth of others, to try and change anybody, do anything. That's not their role for that. Their role is just simply to be who they are. And that's why it takes so long with the 6, because it's this process, and that the process that the 6-2 is on is different. It's different to the other energies. It's different because, others don't see you the same way that you do. And for the 6-2, we always say, imagine what that role model looks like for you, that individual. What does that individual look like? Okay, so if you're a girl, it's still got to be a girl. If it's a guy, it's a guy. And write down, and if you are a 6-2 and you're listening to this really does help. Write down what that person is and who's that person to you. So it's like you're making up a character basically. And you're saying like, oh, I imagine this person and they're 60 and they're so wise and they have done all these things and they're not afraid and they help me and they guide me, right? Because that's who you're going to grow up to be. So thinking about yourself as a future self, that doesn't help. For the 6-2, you build a role model in terms of thinking ahead of what that ultimate role model would have been. Like, so when you were a kid, what would that person who was 15 when you were 9 have been? And what would that person who was 15 told you when you were 9? And then what did that, when you were 15 or 20, what did that 35-year-old have been that looked like and guided you? And for the other numbers, it doesn't resonate as deeply as it does for the 6-2. So 6-2, when you say that, they're like, oh yeah, I get it. Like, that's exactly, it's like, what is that kid's self? What does it look like? So it doesn't matter what age you're at now, draw up that person. And then you reflect on that in terms of who you're going to become. And then lastly, we have the 6-3. Role model, martyr, experimental. I was like, it's almost like that old wise professor who's kind of been through everything. Steve Jobs, very 6-3. If you think about like now what we know about that role model, experimental, trial and error. It doesn't matter if it failed. We're just going to do this crazy ad on Apple. We're just going to like try this and try that. And right. And then everyone's like, oh my gosh, isn't he amazing? Like, that's exactly it. He's such a good example of that because of his experimental, fearless approach in terms of doing something he believed in, standing up for it, being able to put himself out there. And there's so many different examples of that in the world that we see. So, it's that they have to, there is an inward focus, but they can't just watch another person do it, and they can't just wait. They need to know it. They need to live it. They need to do it. So if you have a 6-3 child, let them take apart the toaster, buy another toaster, give them a screwdriver set. They've got to see how it works. You've got to allow that curiosity in that child. It's like, I've got to take it apart. I've got to look at it. It's exactly that. And so because of it, it's a bit of a bumpy ride in that process for them as they move. And again, the 6, remembering, it's a maturation. So if you got that 6th child and you think, oh my word, how's this going to look? Is this child going to be okay? They've got so many more stages of development that they're going to go through. Even if that child, inverted commas, is in their 20s, they haven't even reached their 30s yet. After their Saturn return, they become a different person. They're mutative in that. So that then obviously completes the second part. But what I want to do with just these few minutes that we've got left, I want to go back to where we were in the beginning, because this is in a sense a hexagram journey. We are moving through the numbers of understanding. There's this investigation, there's the retreat, there's the working out, so it's the hero's journey ultimately in that. So I'm going to just go back here briefly, just taking you back into the journey where you started, right? So the system is about living as yourself by understanding your software, allowing you to move with that. And now you can see even the examples that I've used, you're able to identify this. Oh, that's a reflectors chart. And the flow of energy here, the 9 centers, you know what those 9 centers are. You've named them. We've been through them. You know what a channel is. It's when the gates see each other. And how many gates are there? There are 64. And then we looked at the body graph and we said, okay, on the design side, that was the unconscious waiting to be lit up. The personality, the conscious, we're aware of that. We're also aware that each of these symbols here represent the planetary symbols, and those are actually where the planets are sitting inside your chart. So that is a very interesting aspect of human design. And I also do planetary readings in that. And going into next year, I'm going to start talking more about human design, the astrology aspect of human design, and how and where the sun sits out. It doesn't sit in the same place for each of us, as we kind of move around, these numbers shift. So you might have your sun in your head, You might have the sun in your heart. What does that mean exactly? What if that space is open? What if it's defined? These are deeper aspects. Just one more thing for you to consider. I'm going to add a little extra piece of information on here. You can see here that each of these numbers have a point, right? 0.2, 0.3, 0.1, 0.6. At its very basic level, what were the points? The points were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So, there's this, what is gate 15 about? What is gate 10 about? What is gate 1 about? What is gate 7 about? 7 is about being a leader. But what if 7 has a point 2? A leader who is more in the hermit aspect of themselves. So it's not to show you how complex human design is. What I'm actually trying to show you is how ridiculously simple it is once you understand some of these basics. There's so much information. We learned of the centers, and we learned we have different motor centers, awareness centers. We identified what each of these are and their properties that were associated. And then we went into the types and we understood, okay, what does it mean to be a manifestor, generator, projector, and a reflector? And how do these energy types work together? What is their purpose? Because when we work together and we collaborate and we come together and we learn together and we share together and we work on projects together, we need to have different aspects, like you want the projector guiding that, and you need the generator there, and you want the manifestor to help to get things started. And when we went through these slides, what we looked at what were the keynotes about this? What was the not self theme? What is their strategy? What is their signature? Because those were static aspects. And that with this knowledge that you now have tied in with the second aspect, apart from the incarnation cross, because incarnation crosses are complex and they're actually so complex that they are a whole, probably I think it's another year's study on incarnation crosses. So I give a basic incarnation cross reading when I do your chart, but I don't go into the full aspect of incarnation because it's like studying another module in astrology. It's very super complex at its level. And I wouldn't teach that as a workshop either because it wouldn't make sense. It's also something like, I don't know, maybe 300 incarnation crosses, which is why it's impossible to also teach it as a workshop. But all you need to know is that when you look at your chart and you pull a chart, you know the type, you know the strategy, you understand what it means and the profile. And you can look at this and you can be like, oh, where's the sun sitting? Where's the moon sitting? Moon emotions. Use your basic astrology understanding. It's still the same. The properties are still the same. The planets behave the same. This is using human design incorporates astrology into it. So your north node, your south node, where are those in your chart? If you're into astrology, it becomes very, very fascinating to actually have a look at that. So that is human design in as much of a sort of concise, precise, and condensed version of it that I can give you to help you make sense of just reading posts on Instagram, looking at stuff. If you buy a book, if you hear someone talking about it, it gives you a basic understanding of it. So I hope that helps, and you know that you can ask any questions. I'll allow you to unmute your mics. Allow you sounds very instructive. I'll just take the setting off, and then if there's anything you'd like to say or ask, please feel free. And there's also no pressure because I know it's a lot to take in as well. So I know some of you have also been messaging me during the week and asking questions or checking into. So I understand it feels like more of a lecture, of like information than actually asking anything specific. You're welcome. Thanks, Liz. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stop the recording, and then if there is anything, we can talk about it, or I can add it later. Okay. Let me just pause it.